What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Today is Thursday, June 18th. Wow. That's not the last time that I've got a date wrong when opening up the show. But June 18th, Thursday, a lot to dive into on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast today. In particular, I had to choose the subject matter as such. The subject matter of today's episode is one of the most polarizing topics inside the world of sports, and that is the long gone summer ESPN 30 for 30, the latest ESPN 30 for 30 that was released last Sunday. And, among all my criticisms of, baseball and everything that baseball has pretty much put itself through over the last, 20, 22, 25 years, this documentary really painted a picture of just how far baseball has come post the steroid era. Virtually a clean sport now, we could say, pales in comparison to what it was in the steroid era. Now, the subject matter of this documentary was not so much the steroid era, but two key figures within the steroid era, and in a moment in time where baseball was looked at as a relic, where baseball was looked at as a fossilized sport, where baseball was on the outside looking in. And a lot of people wondered whether or not baseball would be able to survive the rise of the NFL, survive the questions that hung over its head as to whether or not baseball could stay relevant in a day and age where everything is faster, quicker, easier to access as technology has made its strides and gains since the late 90s. Baseball is still facing these same questions. How are they going to evolve? Can they evolve? Should they evolve? Those are questions that baseball still has to answer for itself a time or two every now and then. But within this documentary, I found that the two figures of this steroid era, of this documentary in particular, were a part of something really special. And to go back to 1998, to put things in perspective for the sports fans out there, that avid Thomas Take listeners, avid responders to takes that I have, whether they agree or disagree, I greatly appreciate the time and effort that the people take to listen to this show. So I want to start off by saying that. But to put things in perspective, I was not a young man when this stuff was going on. This was 1998. I was 6 years old in the summer of 1998 when Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa were going tit for tat, trying to one up one another to reach the precipice of a single-season home run record that was held by Roger Maris, and prior to that, Babe Ruth. So, 6 years old, at that time, I'm trying to get into sports, trying to get into one sport in particular, baseball. Baseball was the first sport that I really gravitated to. My grandfather was a longtime Little League manager. My dad was a Little League manager for 15, 20 years. I wanted to get involved in the sport. I wanted to be good at the sport. It was the first sport that I really wanted to be good at, that I really wanted to strive to be as best as I could be, not just for myself, but because I came from a bloodline of baseball players, grandfather, dad, uncles, guys that were involved in the game at, a Little League level, high school level. I wanted to be on their teams, and I wanted to play well for those teams. And baseball was the first sport that I really picked up. And when you're a kid and you're trying to pick up a sport, you're trying to pick up baseball, football, hockey, whatever it is, you really want to educate yourself. Even at 5, 6 years old, at least I did, and maybe that's why I'm on this end of things now, behind the microphone, in a podcast format, communicating my sports takes with sports fans, is that I really wanted to learn the success stories, the failures, the history of the sport. I really wanted to learn every facet of baseball, and learning every facet of baseball, you have to learn who the real players are. Who are the guys that stand out? Who are the guys that can really make a difference? Who are the guys that I think stand the test of time? And Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa were those two guys in 1998 during this home run chase. Those were the two guys that I gravitated to outside of my Boston Red Sox fandom. You can't just be a fan of one team. You got to learn about all the players, about all the teams. At least I did. So Mark McGuire for the St. Louis Cardinals and Sammy Sosa of the Chicago Cubs, those were the two players that I really wanted to gravitate to. Those are the two players outside of members of the Boston Red Sox that I really wanted to enjoy and come to love and come to appreciate as I was a 6-year-old kid. And fortunately for me, they made that easy for me. During this home run chase, they grasped my attention. They grabbed the attention of every baseball fan out there by going game for game, at-bat for at-bat, in this thrilling, long-gone summer home run chase that was chronicled in this ESPN 30 for 30. At this time, did I know as a 6-year-old boy what steroids were? No, I did not. At that time, would I have cared if someone told me these two guys are slugging 60, 70 home runs with the enhancements of human growth hormone, or anabolic steroids orally, or taking a shot to the gluteus maximus muscle? I wouldn't have even known what any of that meant. I wouldn't have even cared. Fast forward to now being 28 years old, taking in all these different years of baseball, all these different storylines, all these different legends of the game that have been seen and heard over the last, 22 years. And I still say, looking back, that I wouldn't trade those moments of learning about the game through Mark McGuire, through Sammy Sosa, for nothing. Because those were two guys that helped me get involved in the game in my own way and helped me love and appreciate baseball as much as I do today. And I think within this documentary, it's so easy to talk about steroids. It's so easy to talk about human growth hormone, and what Sammy Sosa did, and what Mark McGuire did, and how these guys bent the rules, cheated the system. But what people forget is that there were no rules. There was no system. It was literally no drug testing at all within the sport of baseball whatsoever. There was no testing whatsoever. There was only hearsay. Is this guy taking this? Maybe he is. Is this guy taking that? Maybe he isn't. That was all there was. And the commissioner at the time, Bud Selig, knew full well what was taking place. That guys were doing whatever they could to stay healthy. By any means necessary, they're going to be in the batter's box. They're going to be standing in the outfield. They're standing at third, standing at short. You get the point. They're going to do whatever they can to stay healthy and stay out there on the baseball field. And if they can't, then they're useless. And Mark McGuire's reasons for taking steroids, in my opinion, with all the research I've done in regards to the topic over the years, Mark McGuire's reasons for taking steroids were far different than, let's just say, Sammy Sosa's. Mark McGuire had injury-plagued seasons as a member of the Oakland Athletics. He got traded to the St. Louis Cardinals with a lot of people knowing that, yes, he was a great home run hitter, but he had injury history. He had injury-plagued seasons. Is he a Band-Aid baseball player? Well, he wanted to prove that notion wrong, and he wanted to perform. He felt like his career was somewhat glass half full heading to St. Louis and wanted to make the most of his opportunity by being out on the field by any means necessary. Sammy Sosa, on the other hand, similar situation, a ton to prove coming into the major leagues as a 165-pound Dominican Republican player that had a lot to prove. Really one of the first guys that had a lot of moxie heading into his MLB career, and a guy that needed to make the most of his opportunity by any means necessary. Pressure, I think, is a common denominator between Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa, but Mark McGuire has since stepped up to the plate, admitting of his steroid use, whereas Sammy Sosa has ducked, dived, dip, dodged the question as much as he possibly can. And that's okay. I don't need these guys to sell their souls to me. I know that these guys went down the path of resistance eventually. If it wasn't that moment that they went down the path of resistance, it was shortly thereafter when baseball decided they were finally going to do something about this, that they were finally going to take a stand, that they were finally going to step up to the plate, pun intended, and say, hey, we can't have this. We can't have players cheating the game in order to break our hallowed record books. And no sport appreciates its history more than baseball. But with that said, no sport has done more damage to itself than baseball. I will remind you guys that Bud Selig knew full well that these guys were doing what they were doing, and at the time it was a ratings boom. He did not care. Only when it was right for him to start caring, only when it was asked of him to start caring, that's when he started to care. And to me, I don't need to throw these guys under the bus more than they already have been. Largely, their lives will be associated with taking steroids. Think of that. Their lives will be associated with taking steroids. Is it really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things? To me, it is not. To some, it is. To me, it wasn't. To me, enough is enough when it is said that, hey, yes, I'm going to admit that I did take steroids. Yes, that I'm going to admit that I was in the wrong. Or even in the case of Sammy Sosa saying, hey, I never failed the drug test in this country. Doesn't mean he didn't take steroids. Means that he might have failed drug tests in other countries and found a way to beat the system in America. Either way, Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa should largely be credited, yes, credited, for the fact that they saved baseball in the post-1994 lockout. And I thought the documentary did a phenomenal job in alluding to that. Without diving into it too much, they did a phenomenal job alluding to that. Sammy Sosa, unfortunately, has not been invited back to Wrigley Field in over 10 years. Do I think he ever will be? I don't know. But you would think that 2016 was enough for Chicago Cubs fans to say, hey, we got our World Series championship. Let's let bygones be bygones. Let's erase our bad past, accept it for what it is, rather than erase it, accept it for what it is, and invite Sammy Sosa back. He had a lot of great seasons in Chicago, steroids or not. No steroid, to my knowledge, can make hand-to-eye coordination any better. Does it make strength better? Yes. Does it help you avoid injury? Yes. Does it help you stay out on the field? Yes. But how much did it enhance the abilities of Sammy Sosa and Mark McGuire? I don't think that much. It's the difference between 70 home runs for McGuire in 98 to maybe 65, 60, 55. It's the difference between 66 home runs for Sammy Sosa in 1998 in comparison to 60 to 55. I don't really see how steroids played a major factor. I think it played a factor, but maybe not a major factor in the abilities of these guys hitting the accomplishments that they did. Granted, you watch these home runs, they're moonshots. They're unlike anything we see today. But Mark McGuire was a home run hitter before he took steroids. He was a home run hitter after he took steroids. Sammy Sosa was a home run hitter before he took steroids. He was a home run hitter after he took steroids. Barry Bonds, same thing. Barry Bonds had 2 separate Hall of Fame careers built within one career. It's really tough for me to say as I sit in my office recording this podcast right now that these guys don't deserve the Hall of Fame when they've given a lot to the game and ultimately have given their lives for only the sake of people saying, hey, this guy took steroids. I'm sure if they could go back and do it over again, I know McGuire said he wishes he played in a different era. Sammy Sosa says, hey, I can't go back in time. I don't have a time machine. Let bygones be bygones. Let these guys just continue to live their lives. At the end of the day, second chances is what America is all about. If baseball is America's pastime, why not give more second chances? I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. For more, you can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, as well on Facebook, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. To follow me on any social media, follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take, as well as Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take.